So science is at the core of all of Dr. Wilson's work and many of his books, including Half Earth. So he has determined that if we manage half the Earth for species, that we can protect the bulk of biodiversity. And as he says, we will enter the safe zone. But it's not just any half, correct? So can you explain how you determined half and why that half is important?
Thank you, and I'd be happy to. So this is where actually that field of biogeography comes in that I was just talking about, and that Ed ultimately covers also in his book, Half Earth. It's very much biogeography applied to the 21st century book, I would argue, and perhaps one of the most important works in that regard for a long time, because it's taking principles out of actually Ed's own pioneering work some time ago now, biogeographic principles, and applies them to how we humans should be thinking about our planet and a sustainable use of our planet today. So at the heart of what Ed is actually talking about in Half Earth, it's initially actually not the places, but it's at the heart is actually our species. So it's the biodiversity. Biodiversity is obviously more than just species. It's the functions, the traits that species have. It's the genetic diversity. It's the diversity of life forms, if you will, all together. But species are a really, really powerful handle and unit to ultimately approach the larger issue of biodiversity and biodiversity conservation. And the science that comes into the picture here is how you connect what's ultimately at the core of the ambition of Half Earth, that is safeguard as many species as possible for future generations. How you go from that aspiration to then a place-based agenda or a place-based action. So I can talk a little more about it in a bit, but let's say we agree that species are vital elements for our planet. We want to minimize losing species as we use more and more of our planet. As we think about how to best manage our planet, we want to minimize the number of species going extinct. So if we can agree on that, then the question really is, okay, what does that mean then? What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? And most of all, where? So that's what then Half Earth, its book, and then the initiative that was born out of it, the Half Earth project and the Half Earth map, aim to address. It's from biogeography, we know from back to Darwin and Wallace or Humboldt, some of the early explorers who took voyages around the world to come back with amazing life forms and highlighting how where they came from back in England or Europe. Things are a little less diverse and perhaps a little duller on the biodiversity front compared to some of the amazing biodiversity in the tropics. They were the first ones to highlight that biodiversity is distributed very unevenly in the world. And in fact, as you think about Galapagos, you have a key example, but another one would be the Madagascar or other such places. There are some parts of the world that hold either many more species than other parts, or they hold species that you just don't find anywhere else. And that's where the science of Half Earth comes in, to try and map out, to document where those places are, not just do it in a one-off way, but actually develop a global map that obviously you don't do in a single afternoon, or you don't even do in a single year. It's something that we've started now, and we are going to have a really, really strong go at an initial push as part of the Half Earth project and Half Earth project map over the next years. But it's this sort of map that you fill in more and more over time and make better and better at the global scale that would ultimately provide this space-based aspect. So the spatial context where it is that some of these rarest species occur, and thereby where it is that some of the top priority places in the world are for biodiversity conservation. And it's not just a random part, it's a very specific part, as you say. And in terms of the amount, we can talk a little more about that later. Ed applied sort of initial biogeographic principles to sort of land at this 50% figure. And that's where that comes from. But it's not a random 50%. It's a very specific 50% where we are trying to provide the science, and many other scientists around the world are advancing this knowledge base for identifying that half or that top priority part of the world that, if we care about saving species from extinction, we need to be particularly mindful about, where we need to think about setting up conservation management activities, reserves, engage local indigenous communities in that larger aspiration of, hey, let's really try our everything. Let's help humanity to try and just limit the number of species we drive to extinction, and that would be lost to future generations for forever.